It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Today we're joined by Peter Lawrence, Brian Gannis.
Hello.
And Jess Hurtigan.
Hello.
Is this the second time since the first podcast we ever did?
I was going to say, I think I was one of the first.
Yeah. So welcome back. It's great to have you here. We're going to talk about preparedness because I had a power outage that lasted a couple days and couldn't get my generator started, which I couldn't get started last time or the time before that, but I did the first time.
Right.
So I realized that I am just not prepared for this and I got to fix this thing. Being prepared, of course, in life is important. You know, the Boy Scout motto. I think that translates really well into everything. So Jess and Brian are here because they prepare. They prepare their butts off.
At least put up a really good facade.
Yes.
Yeah, we make it look as though we're prepared.
Exactly.
Peter, I think, is also a good preparer of things. Yeah. And I'm trying to get better at it. But so Jess, you are part of a lot of kickoffs, a lot of starting up a project. How do you prepare for, and then, kind of talk about when you get to the actual people joining you on the project, getting them to prepare with you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot because a lot of being prepared has to do with experience. So you learn best when you fail, right? So a lot of times I've learned over the years, I need to ask this question. I need to ask that question. And then you start creating things like a checklist in your mind. I need to make sure this consistently happens, right? So then you find patterns. Okay, so a pattern is hardware. So when new engagements happen, the first thing we ask is who's going to establish the hardware? Is it going to be a customer hardware, or is it going to be SDG hardware? And the second we find out it's SDG hardware, we give you, Kyle, the heads up, right? And so you find patterns in things, and as well as just experience. I do have a little checklist when it comes to things we need to think about, but sometimes you go off of that checklist and you realize, we need to talk about this too. We need to talk about that too. And so I guess, I don't know, Brian, is there anything else that you wanted to elaborate on when it comes to being prepared for like new projects, new engagements?
I was not prepared for that question, but no, I mean, I think you summed it up well. Obviously, you can drill into each statement you made, and we could expand on each one of those for hours. But I think the key thing that you kind of noted that I think about this a lot is there's only so much you can learn academically about how to prepare for a project and things, and there is a lot to be said about just the experience of living through it. And you have to kind of go through these and make mistakes and make glaring errors before you really, really cement those items in your head as to, these are the things I really need to make sure I cover this time around. Someone can teach it to you all they want. It's not until you really live through it. And I think there's a big thing to be said about those experiences. And it's not to say you shouldn't go out and attempt to research and learn, but I do think I think people need to get comfortable with the idea that you're not going to be an expert on how to prepare for things until you've lived through it a few times.
Yeah. For sure. And actually, now that you're saying that, it brought up another characteristic. Being prepared is a characteristic, meaning I have coworkers who just aren't prepared. They, no matter how many times they make a mistake and they forget something, they just will always forget it. And so a characteristic that I have, unfortunately, are two things. I'm a perfectionist and I have major anxiety. And so those are two things that drive my preparedness. And there are just some people who are not like that. And that's okay. But it's also nice to balance the people who you work with and people who you're around with someone like me. So I can be a little more annoying, but people appreciate that sometimes. Sometimes it's appreciated.
I need you, but I don't want you.
Yeah, exactly. I get that all the time.
So I wanted to argue with one point that you made, Jess, and that is that you have to fail in order to learn. I think that's an easy way to learn and definitely happens, but you can be prepared for something without failing at it first. Not always, but that just kind of goes to Brian's point of, getting academically prepared for something necessarily. But I was also going to make the comment of, no plan survives contact with the enemy quote, or I'm sure I know I'm misquoting that, but, you can plan everything, have all your check marks checked and everything. And then this new thing happened. And now you've just added another check mark.
Yep, absolutely.
For sure.
And
maybe a fair rephrase of the statement, you have to fail to learn to prepare, is more get ready for the fact that you will fail. It's going to happen, and it's a natural part of this learning process. It's not to say that failure is a requirement for it, but it's going to happen. We've all been through it, and get comfortable with that. You could say you should prepare for that to happen. Oh, it's going to be an hour of this.
Oh God.
Well, and
if you want to stop listening now, I understand.
The fear of not failing. That's my biggest fear, is like somebody can't do their job that I support. And especially when they're at a customer being relied on, and they need to rely on that equipment. So, sometimes we get notice a couple weeks, hey, so-and-so's going out and doing this, and they need a laptop. Sometimes it's Friday afternoon and someone's starting Monday, and they need a MacBook that has a billion giga whatever of RAMs. I don't know about computers. But I was not prepared for that. Right. I've ran to the store last minute, head over to Best Buy and grab, a new MacBook because I didn't have anything on hand and ready. And it's a scramble, if it takes Saturday, if it takes Sunday, it's going to happen. But now I don't have to use my weekends up, and Peter can better backfill when I'm on vacation because I have stuff ready. I have, it's like, we don't want laptops sitting around collecting dust. It's like, well, we're going to have some because I need to be ready. Mm-hmm. And if 20 come back in a day, and I have a big stack sitting here. But it's learning that. And also I would get bent out of shape because I would get last minute requests. And that was also a negative. The people I work with are so nice that there's no punishment needed. You just have to ask the question, why such short notice? And then they will apologize. They will punish themselves. But it wasn't their choice necessarily. Yeah. That's when they found out.
For sure.
So that was a learning curve. And I also have a bunch of stuff here for people to borrow. Why? Because I don't like it when people say, do you have a mouse I could use? And I'm like, I should, but I don't. So here's mine.
Oh, gosh.
No, that never happens. I just laugh. I just show my mouse and go, well, I have one.
You're triggering a thought with me, Kyle, which is I'm probably going to offend some people mildly here, but I take personal offense to people who very proudly display that quote that we see everywhere of the, you're going to have to tell me get the wording right. A lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part.
Right. I was just going to say that.
I understand where we're coming from with that. I get it. I get it. There are very preventable last minute requests that we often have to deal with. And let's face it, they often come from the same people. And that can be really frustrating. I also really do not care for the mentality that everything can be prepped for.
Right.
Something you brought up, Kyle, like the idea that you need to go out and make sure you have a steady, supply of machinery available. That's dependent on other things beyond your control, namely budgets. There are things we all have to factor in that sometimes there are just last minute requests, and we need to be flexible and accommodate for that. Prepare when you can, but also let's be understanding and sympathetic with each other when we can't always deliver it. So I just wanted to mention that, make sure I offended a few people, and take that sign down if you haven't posted anywhere, because I really think it's obnoxious.
If you've seen the extra monitors, you would know how budget conscious I am.
Right.
Well, and I think that goes to like preparedness level, right? There's different levels of preparedness. You could actually buy a laptop for every single consultant, have it all prepared in case they go to a client, and have 150 idle laptops there getting older and more out of date constantly, and just churn through them and keep it up to date, and you'd totally be prepared. But at what cost?
I think of it as likelihood, right? So how likely is this scenario going to happen? If it's high likelihood, you should be prepared, right? We know it might happen. Here's all the situations that it's happened in the past. So let's learn from the past and let's be prepared for it. Or there's situations where it may never happen, like a zombie apocalypse, right?
Oh, yeah.
It may never happen. So there are, to me, I'm not prepared for, well, I am. I actually already
honestly, you left a lot more leeway in there than I was expecting.
I'm so
prepared.
prepared.
I'm a little bit more prepared than I thought. I thought about it, and I have a plan with my kids, and I have a plan with my boyfriend of if an apocalypse happens, here's what we need to know and where to go. I'm not like going above and beyond, but I've thought about it, and we talked about it, and to me, I'm well enough prepared. But if I'm more prepared about having like a hair tie. So I always have to have a hair tie on my wrist or in my purse because my kids, my girls, always need a stupid hair tie. I am way more prepared for that because, again, consistency, highly likely that I'm going to need a hair tie. And so bringing that back to more work-related items, right? We know that when we push to production, if we have a big bang release, there is a high likelihood that we need to plan for people to work off hours because we usually don't push code during production or during core business hours. Right. So let's plan for who's going to push it during off hours. We also need a plan for who's going to support it. Like, okay, we're going to push it, and then who's going to test it to make sure it's working right away, right? So like you need to plan for things that we know are going to happen and based off of experience, right? If I've never pushed to production before, I might do it at noon and then all of a sudden blow shit up and, oh, never going to do that again. So, I mean, there's
never putting an expiration date on a workflow ever again.
Wait,
I had to build a workflow in a hurry. After being burned out because of a big emergency project that got dropped on me. And I did not prepare. I didn't plan. I just built. And I just, do you want this to expire? Like how long? A week. Okay. I launched it and immediately took the week off. And
that's another thing.
It was really, bad all around. And I feel the learning from that just circling around my head, ready for next year. Yeah.
Yeah, there was an I told you so moment just recently where I worked with a customer and they were the business sponsor and they were like, yep, we're going to push to production on a Friday. The end users are not going to use it. They're not going to be around on Friday and they have all weekend. And so then on Monday, when we come back into the office, everyone will be available. And that Friday, a ton of people were going to be on PTO, engineers, developers. So they were going to push Thursday night into Friday morning, and it was okay for them to be on vacation. And I said, are you sure? Like, we need to make sure that we have the tech lead there. We need to make sure that we have this person there and we have backup. Like, they're like, no, it's not going to be a big deal. Well, guess what happened? It was a big deal.
Everything went really well.
It all went flawlessly.
Yeah.
And there was no issues.
Worried
Best
for
client
nothing.
we've ever had.
And obviously you don't say I told you so, but even though when you are prepared and you're telling people you should be prepared and they're thinking, oh, it's not that big of a deal. One thing that I've learned over the years is the follow-up, right? So you always have to follow up. You can give people recommendations on how to be prepared, but then you need to hold other people accountable. Like, did you do this? Because again, it hasn't happened. So it's not number one priority. And so my biggest role, one of the major responsibilities I have is when I say, hey, have we prepared or have we done this? Everyone's like, oh, no, we haven't. Okay, I'll look into that. Guess what? If I never follow up, it never gets looked into.
Now, Jess, that's just the passive aggressive way of saying "I told you so," right?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're still getting that
follow-up.
out, because I think that's really therapeutic and necessary for people. But
I mean, a checklist is only as good as somebody that reads and checks the things off by doing them rather than by seeing a checkbox and checking it, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So Jess and I are basically polar opposites. I love winging it, and I get bit, so I learned to do less winging it. If someone tries to put me in a box, no, I'm going to go, hey, Kool-Aid right out of that thing and just do what I want, which is not good, but it's kind of, I've worked that way, just kind of by feel. And, now it's like, okay, we're getting to a size where that's not really, serving us well. So I have to be more intentional about, okay, what am I going to do today? What's the big thing? And then my prep is getting ready for that big thing, but also my prep is getting ready not to be able to get to that big thing because of 10 things that are going to happen that'll occupy all my time. There's certain, like you said, there's certain things you can prepare for and there's things you can't, but you have to be prepared for those, for things to happen that you really can't control.
So a nice anecdote for this, the way I think about it is thinking back to like the olden times when I was old and, I'm older. So I remember getting prepared for Y2K and all the work that we did to get ready for that. And then I remember how little work we did to get ready for the CrowdStrike fund that happened earlier this year. And the difference in levels of chaos, even though the change was dramatic for Y2K, it covered so many systems, but there was a preparedness there. And CrowdStrike was just kind of it happened and oops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
with something like that, it's like, okay, there's going to be a scenario where updates are going to get pushed out.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do it all at once, and something bad happens, it's everything. Also, some things might happen where I need to physically access that machine that is having the issues, but it's in a data center 3 states away. I have to have somebody on site or in the area. I might have to farm that out to a local company, those types of things. It's like looking at that going, okay, now I'm ready. Now, if this happens, I got somebody on site. I got somebody that can reboot it. I got somebody that can reboot it 12 times because sometimes that fixed it. Or
I will bet you that everybody's more prepared now for that situation than they were 6 months ago, for sure, right?
Absolutely.
We all know updates can, especially driver updates, can give you blue screens and cause problems. It just doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
So we've been lucky not to have to prepare for that scale of an outage. On the development side of things, I did a project where we had 5 people test this custom homepage that would load different widgets depending on what department you were in. So you got to see your stuff, your announcements, calendar, all sorts of things, birthdays, anniversaries. It was wonderful and it worked great. And then we launched it. And then the 150 people or so all went in there.
At the same time.
And all of a sudden stuff's not loading and it's loading at random and it's weird. And like, okay, we didn't really prepare we didn't load test this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So put that on the list.
Well, you read my mind. Being prepared doesn't just happen at the beginning of things. It happens throughout an engagement in a project or, a development of a product. There is always something you need to prepare for. So when code is complete or code is ready for testing, you need to prepare the QA for what they're going to test, right? So they can't just go in blindly. So you have to prepare them for that. When analysts are coming up with user stories, right? They need to be prepared on who they need to meet with. Like, what are the big areas that they need to talk about? So you're always preparing throughout the entire engagement. It's not just a beginning thing and it's not just an end thing. So again, that just comes with experience. It comes with what do I need to know in order for me to be successful? And each individual is personally accountable for knowing what they need. And then they need to communicate that. I need this in order for me to be successful. So let's start working through that. And sometimes though, I've noticed that when you're on a project and you're in the weeds, sometimes it's really hard to be prepared because you have so much stuff coming at you and you're constantly busy and you have like a million things in your brain. So then there's people like me who come in and who are like, ooh, have you thought about this? Ooh, have you thought about that? Ooh, what about this? And it's annoying, right? I'm very annoying to a lot of people, but it's not in a negative way. It's not in a you don't know what you're doing way. It's in a helpful way. It's in a way of, I want to make sure that we are prepared and we haven't dropped something or we haven't forgotten about things because we're so, I don't know, Brian, you just got off of off of a release where you guys were in the weeds and you were super busy and you had so much going on. And I'm sure I know you had me saying, hey, have we thought about that? Have we thought about this? You had about 10 other, leaders coming to you saying, have you thought about this? Those are the types of things. It's nice when you're in the weeds to have somebody else think about things that you can't.
Yeah. There's also a big process where you're scrapping old plans all the time because what made sense 2 months ago no longer makes sense and you have to completely rethink what you're preparing for. We also run into conflicts. What person A wants to plan for is not what I want to plan for. And if we do decide to plan for it, we may disagree on what that should look like. And so now you're getting into the politics of it and, trying to make sure that everybody's friendly and happy with each other while still delivering the solution and that preparedness for whatever it is you're getting ready for. There's a lot to it. And if you are completely in the weeds, completely inundated with work, now you're asked to take a step back and just think about things for a little bit. Well, we don't always have time. And so now you're doing it on your free time. And there's a lot. Like, it is a huge mental tax to ask people to prep for things that may never happen and are not immediately foreseeable.
Exactly.
Because you're just making things up at a certain point. Experience helps guide that imaginative thought into a more coherent plan, but you're making it up at a certain point. And
because I'm guessing you did not plan for the zombie apocalypse on your release, right?
I also am always a little prepped for that. My plan is just walk at a brisk pace, and I think I should be fine. So I'm not too concerned like Jess seems to be, but
there's really a cost. And it's really bad. At least I feel it's bad when someone else didn't prepare and then you're paying the price.
Yes.
My example is waiting tables at Perkins and 4 a.m, the place fills up. Like, did no one realize when opening deer hunting was?
Why would people go out for breakfast before deer hunting at 4 a.m? I mean, that's so unusual. It never happens every year.
One server, one cook, and a full restaurant, and just running. And then my morning relief came in and like, what can I do for you? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Go do something. Run around
and coffee, find out if anybody
and run food. I don't know.
But imagine being a manager, brand new to managing a Perkins. They don't know that November 2nd or whatever weekend it is they're for what, 23 years old?
Yeah, they're from
a,
Nebraska or something, and
or versus a manager who's 40 plus years old and has done this. They're like, yep, I need to manage my weekend differently. So that is with experience. That's, going back to what it means to be prepared. Sometimes you just have to learn.
And there's also, this is why we, espouse all the benefits of retros and things of that nature, because there are certain things that it's okay if you're not prepared for that to happen again. Things like what Kyle's describing, that should happen once and only once at a restaurant that's open 24 hours, like that's a mistake that can easily be corrected in the future. There are other mistakes that, these things happen, but we need to take a moment to reflect on those things we could have been prepared for. And if we weren't, justify why you don't need to do it again. And if you can't justify it, what is the plan? Who's going to come up with the plan? It's cumbersome, it feels bulky, and it feels like work just for the sake of work sometimes. But if you're ready, next deer opener, you did your job,
Right.
Yep.
It's going to be very boring.
Right. Yep.
Preparing does make things go smoother. If you have a rollback plan, you push to production and you cross your fingers that you don't need it and everything's smooth. But if you have a rollback plan, you execute on the rollback plan. If you don't have a rollback plan, you are scrambling. You're like, holy shit, what do I need to do? And it's fire, it's preparedness helps make things smoother for when it does happen. If you don't have it, then it's much more difficult.
One of the thought that triggered for me, Jess, was one of the things that drives me nuts is when things actually go really well and then they keep going well. And so we kind of use that as a subconscious justification to just not worry anymore.
Right.
And then when things do go wrong, eventually, it's bad. And you're really trying to avoid the I told you so's, but you don't even have time for that because now you're all scrambling trying to fix something. But yeah, that to me has always been one of the worst obstacles to this is you have people who kind of get lucky and they don't worry about these things until something really bad happens, and it easily could have been avoided. But that's a life lesson that some people just have to learn truly the hardest way possible. And if they're making decisions and they're in charge, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Can't force someone to plan for the zombie apocalypse, right?
Right.
I mean, it's out there. They've made movies about it, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's possible, but but again, if you have 20 releases in a row go perfectly, it's going to be really hard to justify. All right, let's come up with the rollback plan. Like, really, we need a rollback plan?
Yeah.
Like, well, if we don't have one, we're certainly going to fail.
That's that scenario is kind of why people will go off their medication. They're taking medication for something and they feel better. They feel great. And it's like, oh, I feel better. I don't need to take this anymore.
I don't need to take this. Everything's
You were
smooth.
feeling better because every day you did that thing and it helped. If you stop, that's really bad. You're going to get bit. So God, there's lessons everywhere in this space. But it's like we have planning meetings, but we don't call them prep meetings. There's the difference. You're planning on what you're going to do versus you're planning on what might go wrong. What might, and kind of your frame of mind going into that meeting. Like, do you have meetings and sessions where you're just focusing on prep, mitigating the risks of bad things happening?
Yeah, they're not, I don't know how to say this. You can't always have negative doomsday meetings, right? So that is depressing. And like I was saying, I have anxiety. And so the reason why I'm kind of good at preparing for the worst is because I think about the worst, like what could go wrong. And I don't make it other people's anxiety. I make it my own. So for example, what could go wrong? I'll be like, hey, Brian, like, have we thought about doing a mock run of the deployment prior to release? And if Brian says no, I'll be like, well, why? What about this? And what about that? And Brian may say, oh, yeah, maybe we should. So then I don't create a meeting around it. I create more of like an awareness. Let's be aware of things that could go wrong. And then again, there's that follow-up of, okay, did we ever do mock? And if the answer is no, what happens when we don't do a mock and now everything's messed up during the release? Now, how are you going to plan for that or prepare? How are you going to prepare for that? So no, there's not really meetings. There are risk conversations, right? So before Agile, before Scrum, there was Waterfall. And during Waterfall, as a PMI or PMP certified project manager, we had a whole lesson on risk management. And there's high risks and there's low risk. There's risk mitigation and risk contingency. Then there's knowns, unknowns. There's known unknowns, unknown knowns, unknown unknowns, right? So like I had to learn about all the different types of things to plan for, and then you document them. So you create all the things that could happen. Then you document them. Are they a known? Are they an unknown? Are they a known unknown? Are they an unknown unknown? And then you have to come up with a mitigation plan. And then you have to come up with a contingency plan, because if that doesn't happen, then you need to think of something else. And then you need to categorize them, right? And then you need to get like approval on all of these things. So like my training has caused me to constantly think about this, but now in Agile and Scrum, that is not focused on at all. We typically don't talk about risks and mitigation plans and contingency plans. And so that's where my classically trained brain comes into, hey, have we thought about this? Let's do this. Let's do that. So it's not really meetings, because in the past, there used to be meetings. In the past, right. I used to have a plan and it needed to be approved. And there was tons of planning around the plan and around like preparing. Now it's less formal and more about, hey, have we thought about this? And then, working in an agile, iterative manner on it.
And a lot of that, if you're in a truly agile environment, you mitigate by releasing early and often,
continuously.
Right?
Yep.
And so you get good at it, you practice it, you practice the mitigation, because obviously it's going to go poorly at some point, hopefully early in the process, so that you can work all the bugs and kinks out of it and get really good at releasing quality software. But, again, that's in the purest form of Agile. We tend to work in the realist form of Agile, where we don't necessarily release software every iteration, right? Mm-hmm. We may release once every 2 iterations or 4 iterations or more, right? Just because maybe the business is still waterfall and the development team is agile. And so releasing software would throw off that balance a little bit. So you release it to UAT, but it never goes to production. And so you kind of practice it, but you're still not production. And production gets more and more out of sync with what you started with as you go on too. So
there's also a dangerous...
this will be quick, Brian. When you were talking about, the plan, the contingency plan, the backup plan, it reminded me of I'm going to go comic book nerd for a second. The leader of the X-Men is Cyclops, and he's considered to be one of the best, team leader in the Marvel universe. And someone asked him, do you have a plan B? He's like, I don't use B. I don't use letters. That would indicate I only have 26 plans.
No.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
That's sick.
It's awesome. Yeah.
But also, if anyone said that to me in real life, I would hate them. I'd be so annoyed.
Oh, yeah. You are...
I wouldn't believe it.
Such an overachiever.
Also, how unimaginative. Then you just move on to plan AA. Come on.
Right.
We worked this system out. Come on.
This has been done
Excel
before.
has been doing this for years.
This is why everybody hates Scott Summers, honestly.
Well, I'm glad you know his name.
I had to dig for a little bit, but I got it. It was in there.
So, I think about all the disasters, all the things that homeowners face just by owning a home. And you don't think about it. You're not prepared for tree removal.
Right.
You don't think about tree removal. And you love this house because of all the trees.
So you write that first check, and then you're like, oh, that's what tree removal feels like.
Yep.
And now after 15 years, I've got $8,000 sunk into tree removal. Dutch elm disease, lightning strikes.
You're getting off light if it's only $8,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good.
Well, I know a guy.
Yeah.
But things like that, it's like when you buy something that you're going to add to, it's like a tackle box,
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm prepared to spend $100 on the world's greatest tackle box. It's like, okay, well, I wasn't prepared for $1,000 worth of lures, Rapalas, fish hooks, whatever's in there, leaders, sinkers, bobbers. Yep.
Well, and sometimes when you tell people, they don't believe you. So the idea that I have in my head is my best friend just had a baby. Mm-hmm. And we play darts every Monday night. And she's like, well, I'll just bring the baby to darts.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, no, that's not going to work. Like, they're going to be moving and like they're going to need this and they're going to be that. You're going to have to focus on the baby. She's like, nah.
It'll be fine.
So you can try to prepare others too. But until they experience it, they won't even prepare themselves. Or I have another friend who's like, I want to buy a house. And right now she's renting a townhome. And I'm like, you need to be prepared for the money it's going to take for you to buy a house. Like the upkeep of a house and doing everything by yourself. And she's a single woman. And I'm like, here's all the things that I have to worry about. And she still did it. You have
that phrase, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah. It's also hard to recollect all these lessons that you've learned over the course of time. I mean, I'm in the third house that I've owned, which for some people is still not even that many. And if I were to talk to a first-time potential homeowner right now, I don't even know where I would start with my thought process. I learned those lessons 20 years ago. I don't remember anymore. I remember the big ones. You will have to cut trees down someday. It's insanely expensive. Appliances are going to go out. Those things, like, I remember those. I don't remember how the outdoor faucet on the outside of my house snapped one day and I had water spraying everywhere, you know? Prepare yourself for learn where your water shutoff is. Yeah. Learn where your gas shutoff is. Like, I've never thought about that until someone reminds me sometimes houses have water and gas line issues. And like, I've just dealt with them. So the first thing I know instinctively when I've moved into a new home is, where are my shutoffs? Yeah. Now that I'm saying that, I don't know where my gas shutoff is, so I know exactly what I'll be doing as soon as this meeting is concluded. But so I'm still relearning. I'm still learning a lesson that I thought I had learned, and I just literally now discovered that I still have not effectively learned how to prepare for everything I want to prepare for.
Yeah.
And again, going back to work and what we do for a living, I just realized this right now. My core job is preparing. So I'm creating a integrated delivery playbook where, yes, I have all this experience, and yes, Peter does, and Kyle and Brian. Like, I am bringing all this experience into one playbook so that when there's new people coming onto our team, they don't have to fail. They don't have to do something wrong. They can look and they'd be like, oh, here's a checklist, or, oh, here's what I haven't thought of. So I am already preparing for someone to come in and say, okay, here's what you need to think about when releasing. Here's what you need to think about when planning UIT. Here's what you need to think about when creating new environments and pushing into your QA environment. Like, we are creating that, and our role as experienced leaders in the organization is to document and create a checklist so that other people don't need to mess up. Where's the emergency release valve for when something happens?
Right. You don't have to have 17 years of experience doing this to get to that level. Like, that would be horrible if everybody coming in would not be to this level until 17 years or whatever. Right. No.
I think, kind of telling the story of what happens when you don't. You're going through all those things and nobody wants to do extra work that's unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so if you're going to skip these things, just know that you could be in for some pain and suffering.
Yep.
Right.
You're not going to know how to shut off your gas. So you're going to be running around in a house with a gas leak. Mm-hmm. How long do you want to do that and risk passing out? Or you're going to be running around opening every window in your house and calling the gas company, who will come out and help you for free.
Right.
Deal with that every time. So call them. Mm-hmm. I did.
They don't like house explosions any more than you do.
No. But it's those the safety measures you take, and then do you prepare? I mean, when you're going through all this stuff, do you identify things that are just not worth preparing for? They're so rare.
The cost of preparing is greater or equal to the cost of the failure, right? Like, that could happen, but if I waste that time planning for it and making a plan for it, it does happen. It will take me the exact same amount of time to fix it, even without a plan. So I'm not going to do that one.
We also have this amazing thing called our phones and the internet. So if something does happen, I mean, I go exactly. I know exactly where to go. YouTube, right, is my number one place to go. So sometimes we don't have to because we have, infinite amount of knowledge at our fingertips.
Yeah. I remember a scenario where a company that was what do you call it, co-location. You have somebody hosts servers,
right?
And they were doing the backups. The backups had never been tested,
right?
And then some idiot blew away a site collection.
That sounds suspicious.
Who was it?
I wonder.
Know where you're at in SharePoint before you hit delete. Know what site you're in. You do that one time, but
how did the test go?
They couldn't restore it.
Oh,
it didn't work. They didn't have it set up right. So they paid a company to do their backups for 3 years, and they didn't have. So what were we spending our money on?
Yeah.
Well, the company did work, and the company paid for work. But if you back up the development server that whole time, it does no good when the production server fails, right? It gives you a little bit of a heads up. But if you had backed up the production server, you could just restore it and be right back up and running. So preparing for the wrong thing is just as bad as not preparing at all.
Ooh, I don't know why all of a sudden I thought about this. Business continuity plans. Do you guys remember those?
I've heard those
plans?
words put together in a sentence in that order before, but.
So again, one of my first in the IT world and in my professional world was creating a business continuity plan, which was if the building collapsed or if the building started on fire, what was the chain of command of who needed to be notified and what needed to happen for the systems and for everything to remain working. It was one of the, maybe that's why I have anxiety.
Probably.
Because that was one of my first projects.
I mean, the big companies, they have entire departments dedicated to business continuity. And there's entire teams of people across the globe designed to just prep for disasters.
Yeah.
Well, I know a sysadmin that they have to do every year. They have to do their business continuity testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they have drills.
Yeah.
Someone goes into the server room and pulls the plug. All right.
Whatever. Okay. Yep. Here, let's do it. Let's practice. Again, there's the practicing part of it too. So you prepare and you practice. I
was going to say, if you don't practice having that building collapse, I'm guessing it contained the business continuity plan, and it would be very hard to pull that out, right? And
that's how it would go too. Like, where do we keep the plan? Oh, it was in that folder.
It's over there.
Yeah.
I thought about that though. I had two in one building, so I had another building that had the business continuity plan. Got to think about those things.
And then, kind of educating people about surprises that happen. About like we didn't prep for everything because we couldn't possibly prep for everything. Yeah. So when something happens that's out of left field, it's like it's really nice when you have leadership that understands that and knows kind of what happened and can give you a little forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's getting in trouble. That's pain and suffering that I don't want. I never want to be in trouble.
Well, and I don't know, most businesses these days, if there's an incident or a problem that happens in production, they go through, they do a I don't know, some people call it a root cause analysis, right? Okay. So you determine why that problem, that thing that you weren't expecting happened. And is it something important that we can fix and not do again? Or is it, hey, solar flares?
Yeah.
Yep. I think Brian brought up the retro part. And a common mistake we have is the reflection afterwards, or we forget about the reflection afterwards. And so I think we do need to do a better job at reflecting on if something does happen, the why behind it, the not blaming, like the blameless type retros and reflections. Right. I think that needs to be more ingrained into our normal, make that normal.
I wanted to touch on the blame piece too, because that's what I've gone through a few root cause analyses at this point, and it feels like what those ultimately boil down to is who's at fault for this.
Pointing
And that is the
fingers.
wrong mentality. Because
That's me.
the problem is, I mean, one, let's just get away from blame game in general.
Yep.
You know, when that's not going to help anything. But two, when you identify that it wasn't your fault, it's very easy to slip back into laziness and just thinking, I got my part right, so I'm doing everything right. But that could just as easily happen to me the next day.
Yep.
So get away from the blame game, and instead it's a lesson learned for everybody.
Yep.
And let's all figure out how we move on from it and prepare for the next time.
And did you know it wasn't you when it first happened, or did you think it might be you?
Right.
And if you thought that, you should probably be preparing for that. because
Exactly.
It
Yeah.
might be you next time.
Right.
Might be
Right.
next time.
Yeah.
But I used to have a problem exists only to find somebody to be responsible for it, right? That was sort of the saying at some companies. And really that doesn't help anything. It doesn't make anybody want to, supply any information. Oh, I secretly found it. I secretly fixed it. And therefore I won't get the blame for this.
Yeah.
Oh, it just started working again. Oops.
I found a field once in a company's Jira instance that on their bugs, it wasn't in usage, but it was in their custom fields. They had a field that they had created for, essentially it was asking who caused the bug, literally who,
Yeah.
and it was a pick a person field.
Pick a person. Nice.
It was one of the most toxic things I've ever discovered without really getting to talk about it, because I didn't even want to mention it. I just want to pretend I wanted to pretend like I never even found it, because it's such a bad way of thinking about things, and it's only going to hurt in the future.
Yeah. And accountability does not mean blame.
Right.
No. Yep.
Yeah. I think each of us here has been accountable for an issue at one point or another, right? Or constantly.
I mean, I've been to blame for an issue. It has 100% been my fault. I goofed. I messed up. I failed to prepare for something. It was on me. But there have been plenty of other times when I could have rubbed someone else's mistake in their face, just like they could have to me. But instead we move forward as a team instead of as two people just shouting at each other. And it helps both of us get ready for the next thing. So
for the next thing, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
All right, Kyle. I think
People
it's final
punish
thought.
themselves enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny when someone like breaks their screen, someone, gets their laptop stolen. I go into nice, gentle, caretaking mode, not blame, punishment. It's like, because that's going through their head. I don't want to pile on.
Sure.
We'll have
long
to
as
have
they
a
don't leave
whole
it.
thing on blame. But that stuff happens.
Right.
We're
does.
humans.
But you can prepare, meaning we all know you don't leave your computer just laying in your car so everyone sees it. I
Right.
teach my girls all the time. I see them put their phone down on a table and walk away. And I am like, no, you grab your phone. You bring that everywhere with you. You do not just lay something for someone to easily steal. So there is a level of preparing too that you need to be taught, because I'm not going to leave. And if I do leave my computer in my car, all of a sudden I get anxiety. All of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I think I just left my purse just laying right there. Like, you get that anxiety. So there is a level of preparedness too that you need to learn for those things too. Because if it keeps on happening, right, like having something stolen one time, but then again and again and again.
But conversely to that, if all I'm doing is coasting through life, thinking about everything I have to do to make sure that nothing goes wrong, that's not a life. That's just just anxiety,
That's why I said.
Right.
Really
and there is a balance that you have to find. And it's one, like, I suspect a lot of, couples go through this. I mean, my wife and I are a good example. I am, in my personal life, I am very much a preparer. I want to be ready for just about everything. And she is way more go with the flow. We need each other to balance that out, because I'm there to help with the emergencies. She's there to make sure I don't have a nervous breakdown every single time there's a weird noise in the house that I don't recognize. It's important to find that balance and find the people who help ground you, coworkers and personal life. We need both of those ends of the spectrum, as well as everybody in the middle. You need every single one of those viewpoints to help keep things working and healthy.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So as we wind down, parting thoughts. My parting thoughts, your water shut off, know where that is, know where your gas shut off is. Know where the gas shutoff is for different things.
Yeah.
Because you might not need to shut all the gas off if it's just a stove. Fire extinguishers, flashlights, just all that stuff. And then
always keep
on your
a piece of
projects,
lumber available in case someone's getting actively electrocuted.
Yeah.
So you can knock them away.
Yeah.
That one's in here.
Now, wait
That's
a minute.
A new one. That
Hold
is
on.
A new one to
You don't
my
have
brain.
2x4s sitting around your house ready to knock people away from every circuit in the place.
I know
right?
where every 2x4 is that I have easy access to.
All right. I think with that, we can shut her down and say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.